Good evening and welcome to our webinar tonight. I'm Ben Small, Superintendent, Central Valley School District. Welcome those who were on our other previous webinars, and for those of you who are new, we hope to provide you with some great information tonight. I'd like to introduce our panelists who will be presenting. Mr. Jay Rao. Mr. Rao will be presenting on safety protocols as well as nutrition, meal service. This is Molly Carlin. Molly will be reporting on elementary special education. Mr. Kent Martin will be reporting on technology and also our high school options for our students this fall. Marla Nunberg will moderate tonight. Marla, thank you. Tim Newtonboom will be talking about our virtual options and also some of our childcare options and outreach. Mr. Eric Brewer. Eric will be talking about our secondary special education options and how we're serving our special education children. Dr. Matt Lambert. Dr. Lambert will be talking about our middle school options and the middle school schedule as we move forward and what it'll look like for our middle school students. Eric Hoagland, he will be doing the same, but we'll be talking about our elementary school students and what their schedules will look like and what elementary school will look like. And Dr. Terry Vanderwegen. And Dr. Vanderwegen will talk about our outreach programs, childcare programs, and we'll be talking about how maybe you might be able or want to be involved to help us as we move forward. Tonight, we'll share details of our reopening plan and our back to school options with you. Our reopening plan can be viewed on our district website, www.cvsd.org. The full plan is there. Our plan is built for us to return in person as soon as possible. And tonight, we're going to talk about the options that you'll have in our virtual start to the school year. And we want to help you in making decisions for your family. I know that we miss our students and we wish that they were able to return in person much sooner than they are. And I also know as a father and our family, we are working through the same issues that you're working through as you choose the options that are best for your family. Gracie and Elliot, Grace sure is disappointed that she is not going to be back in person right away, but she will experience 6th grade and middle school, and we hope to be back in person soon. And of course, Elliot, as he starts his year as a freshman at Central Valley High School, has that same excitement and some of the same disappointments as we have to start in this virtual realm. We are excited, however, about the virtual options that we have designed for you that will keep your children engaged, connected, and learning, and offer families the ability to seamlessly move between a virtual environment to an in-person environment when it's deemed safe and appropriate for us to do so. Or at the same time, great options for you if you want to remain learning in the virtual environment for the remainder of the school year. We want you to know that we're committed to the health and safety of our students and staff and families. And as such, it's important for us to follow direction of health experts on when it's safe for us to reopen our school buildings. We want you also to know that we are ready to reopen school when it is safe to do so. We have health and safety protocols in place and have created a nimble education system to be able to shift between the virtual world and the in-person learning. We are so grateful for your continued support and engagement of our Central Valley School District community and our parents, staff, and families. We know this is a challenging time, but we also know that the Central Valley School District community is vibrant, resilient, and strong. And I'd like to go ahead and begin with the presentations tonight. This is the third of our interactive webinars, we'll now turn it over to Mr. Newboom.
Good evening. I'm going to share with you tonight, as Superintendent Small has shared with our community, that we will offer 4 options as we look to return to school in the fall. One of the things I would ask that you would visualize in this is that in these 4 options, think of a flow chart. One of the questions you might consider asking yourself is, I plan to return to school when we're able to do so. that will look at option 1 and 4. The others will be like, even if we have the option to return to school, my family is in a situation where I do not feel comfortable returning to school. And that will be a full-time virtual option in options 2 and 3. Some things I want to talk about each of these options. We have both a self-paced model and we have a school-paced model. And one of the things that we have in the school-paced model is really looking at how do we replicate if students were to return in person, what's that day look like? In the elementary, it's coming in, having a community meeting, really structuring your day and working through the content of the day. Similarly, in high school and middle school, where students have select offerings, some of their core classes, potentially exploratories and or some electives, and that they would still have that structure that is really teacher directed in a school-paced model. Being school-paced really means that as a parent, if you're able to have your student log on, the guidance daily connected from the previous day's learning to the current day's learning to the next is really going to walk you through that. Self-paced is really, I'm a parent and a couple of things. One, I want to own my child's education right now. So I want to be able to drive the instruction. I might accelerate a little bit, I might slow it down, or I might stay on pace with where the school is in the event that we return in person. The idea of this is that some families just do not have the ability. It might be a childcare issue, or they're staying with grandparents, or you have technology issues that you're not all able to log on during a school day. So the self-paced option might be a good option for you. So again, if you're going to choose to return to school, option 1 and 4 are your best option. If you're going to return, if you decide that you're going to stay virtual the entire time, then option 2 and 3 are a great option in that. What we like about these options, while we would prefer having our students in school in this uncertain time, these options do provide families flexibility within that. So for example, with regard to flexibility, option 1 and 4, you're assigned to your home school. So if I'm an Opportunity Elementary student and I plan to return to school, I'm assigned to Opportunity Elementary School. I choose option 1. If I realize that that schedule becomes too demanding, then I simply work with my school administration and my classroom teacher to start looking at what we could do, which could lead us into option 4. We decide to go self-pace or vice versa. But that would really be part of the team of school, the team at the school that would help guide you through that. And I think that what's key in that is with the plan to return to school is in a self-paced option, you're going to have a teacher that's behind the scenes, that same teacher that would be the same teacher for option 1 that provides you a weekly pacing. So you kind of know where the class is progressing. You can access online lessons as a parent, but you have the ability to do that at your own pace with regard to the instruction. And if at the point we do return in person, you stay in track with everyone else that is doing the school-paced model. We're really excited for option 2 and 3 for those families that are just really feeling uncertain. They might be immunocompromised, they might be essential workers. These options are really going to be geared for you to continue for the remainder of the year. What we really plan to do around this is really create an environment that is much like being in your home school. If you're K-8, you would enroll in Central Valley Virtual Learning. There would be opportunities for extracurricular and co-curricular activities such as Math is Cool or ASB. We'd also be able to develop a PTO and PTA or a PTA so that parents can be engaged and involved. And what we also know is that as you project out to the fall of 2021, this option may only be needed for this year, that you would be guaranteed a spot back in your home school in the fall of 2021. If you don't plan to return to school, option 2 and 3 are best. If you do plan to return to school, option 1 and 4 may be a good option for you. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Hoagland that will talk a little bit about the elementary schedule. But before I do that, I want to keep in mind that these are sample schedules. And in these sample schedules, we've really focused on how do we make sure that we're providing for the core curriculum. We recognize what we're sharing with you tonight doesn't necessarily outline some of the options that we're continuing to work on for developing health and fitness in there, some of our fine arts. And also keep in mind that while it looks on paper like a lot of screen time, we too value the importance of not always, or the belief that students shouldn't always be on the screen. So we will certainly be moderating that. We will certainly have flexibility with that so that we are having balance with that, but it will always have a teacher available for students as we guide them through their instruction. So Eric?
Thanks, Mr. Newton-Boom. So before you see what Tim shared as our virtual example of our elementary, this is what we would look at in the option 1 that Mr. Newton-Boom was explaining. If you take a glance at this virtual or this sample schedule, you see that we start our day, each day, with what we call a morning meeting. It's a very typical thing in the elementary school that we have a morning meeting, but in this situation, we're going to spend our time focusing on that social emotional learning. We realize that students left our schools a bit abruptly last spring. We want to make sure that we take time each day to make sure that we're caring for them and where they are and the needs that they have. We then move into our instructional block each time. And at this time, you'll see that we have the ELA, which is the English Language Arts. ELA is a bit of a modern term, we could say, in the education world, where we talk about reading and writing. And the first part of the ELA, this would be our reading time. You would see that we have students that are broken into small groups with instruction being given by the teacher. And then the other students not in those small groups would be working independently. And they could be doing something such as MobiMax, which is our adopted virtual program to supplement our regular curriculum that happens in our classroom, or IDR, which stands for independent reading. You can see then after that, we transition into a large group or whole group instruction by the classroom teacher. And then we switch back into small groups where we have other students in different groups going there. As Mr. Newton-Boom was explaining, this is an example in these small groups where we would be able to break up some of that screen time. When students may be working with their teacher, the other students may be able to work on pen and paper or pencil paper or other activities rather than having to be on the screen at that time. You can see we put in some natural breaks into our sample schedule, such as for bathroom or snack or brain breaks. We know that our youngest learners like to get up and move, and we want to make sure we honor that. After that, we go into a writing group, which is another part of our ELA block, whole group, and then small group, and then we have ourselves a lunch. The afternoon is very similar. It's just our math block and our science and social studies blocks. But you can see that the pattern repeats itself from the morning to the afternoon. And then at the end of the day, you'll notice that we have another class meeting. In this case, instead of a morning meeting, a class meeting where we will again spend time working on our social emotional learning and making sure we're taking care of our youngest learners. At the end of the day, that 3:10 time is a great time where we can have our teachers are able to have access for parents who may have questions, or even students who may have questions or want to follow up from something earlier in the day, or even a time when students might want to be able to work and finish up any last minute work, so that at 3:40, we're able to tell our students they can close up the elementary day and have the rest of their afternoon or evening with their family. So this just gives you an idea on some sample scheduling we put together as we think about what option 1 would look like in the virtual. I'll send it now over to Dr. Lambert, who can talk to us a little bit about middle school.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. To serve our middle school students, we worked with the Community Stakeholder Committee all through the summer. And looking at the first table, we have a sample of a middle school student schedule for you. And one of the things that became clear as we worked with that committee and as we got feedback from our parents was that a 6-class schedule in a virtual environment is very difficult, both for a student as well as for parents and families to keep up with, as students have to balance the workload of 6 different classes with 6 different teachers, and that means 6 different sets of expectations, and not always do teachers collaborate on how much homework is assigned each night and that sort of thing. So one of the things that became clear from the beginning is if we can shorten that 6-class load, then that would substantially help our students as they're navigating in a virtual environment. And so we were able to move this through some creative work to a quarter system. And in this quarter system, our students will have 3 assigned classes each quarter. There'll be semester-length classes, but shortened down to complete that semester in 1 quarter's time. So a student will still have 6 classes each semester, but they're only completing 3 at a time each quarter, and it allows that work to be more manageable. And so if you look there at the example, there's just 4 students as an example. But the other thing that became clear was not only are academics important in middle school, but so are some of those periphery classes, those health and fitness and PE classes and the exploratory classes. Those are some of the reasons our kids get up and go to school in the morning, and we don't want that to be lost. We want them to have those motivational pieces of school as well. So we created schedules so that each middle school student, each quarter, will have 2 core classes, a core class, English language arts, history, math, or science. So they'll have 2 of those and a PE or exploratory in that schedule. And if you look down at the second table there, this just gives you an idea, an example of what a typical day would look like if you choose option 1 or 2. With option 1 or 2, this is a school-paced model. And whether you have the intent to come back to school or to leave, or not leave, but stay virtual for the rest of the year, this is an example of what that school-paced would look like. And the first thing that you'll notice in that is that the 3 periods that we talked about above, each is in a 90-minute block. And so as they go through the day, they'll have 90 minutes of class with 10 minutes passing or lunch and a passing period to take a break, get a snack in between classes, and then come back for their next class. That 90-minute block, I also want to be clear, is not meant for teachers just to be lecturing for 90 minutes while students are on the other side of a screen. But this, just like a student is in class, a teacher will be taking them through an instructional sequence and working. There may be 10 minutes or at the beginning of a lesson where they will actually teach them direct instruction of a new skill, and then allow some time for students to practice with that skill, allow for some breakout within that virtual environment for students to work with each other and or students to pull, or a teacher to pull small groups of students and work with them during that 90 block of time. And the other thing I would point out about this schedule is by the end of the day, that last hour, we have teacher access time while students are working independently on their work, but will still have access to be contacting their teacher and working through maybe some of the more difficult problems or questions that they might have through the day. So hopefully this gives you an idea of what a day in option 1 or 2 would look like. And I will turn it over to Mr. Kent Martin to share about our high school schedules.
Thank you, Dr. Lambert. As we look at the high school, similar to the middle school, we are going to focus on 3 classes each quarter. So you can see in the schedule there, we have 3 periods. Our high school kids generally register for their courses for the fall in the previous February, March timeframe. And so we do have schedules that have been developed around a 6-period day for a semester. We're going to look at just quarters, which would be 9 weeks long, and we'll get actually a semester's worth of coursework for 3 classes in those 9 weeks. We've been asked a lot about what are the classes going to be. Is it still a full selection of courses at our high schools, including CTE courses, AP courses, and that? The answer is yes. We do have many of these courses, actually the vast majority of these courses in the online CVBL, excuse me, and SVL learning. There are some courses that we have to create, however, because they aren't already preloaded in that system, and we're working to do that with those teachers. You'll notice in the high school schedule, there's also a period that has to do with advisory, advanced placement, high school and beyond. All of our high school kids have a high school and beyond plan that they must complete. This helps them in the 24 credit diploma in case they're want to substitute for either their world language courses or one of their other credits that's outlined in that. And so we do want students to complete the high school and beyond plan. We also know that for some of our AP courses in particular, the exam that's right now in mid-May may be a bit problematic in terms of kids who might have 1 quarter of their AP class, maybe first quarter and 1/3 quarter, or 1 second and 4th quarter, and there's a lag time between courses. So we're going to be working to determine some enrichment lessons and some other lessons that we can provide kids during those off quarters from their AP classes so they can remain engaged with that content and still be successful on those exams. the time I was just talking about in the schedule would be a time that kids could work on that as well. And we also want to make sure that there's time in the schedule for social emotional support for kids. So our counselors may be running some groups during that advisory time as well, just for kids' social emotional needs. As we move forward and we take a look, as I said, at our CVBL coursework, we do have a full range of courses, and that's really for any option, any of the 4 options. We will have courses available for students similar to the traditional courses that we have always offered in the past. At this time, I'll pass it on to our Director of Elementary Special Education, Molly Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Our special ed department has been working on and aligning our services with gen ed services and with OSPI recommendations. We have 3 different options: in-person, kind of a hybrid model for our students that access gen ed curriculum, and as well as special ed curriculum and service and a 3rd option, which is fully remote. Our case managers are reaching out to all families at this time to really get the feel of, are you looking at that hybrid model? Or are you looking at remote learning? What's going to be best for each child, depending on their IEP. And then from there, we are working on those schedules. What will that look like? What times will students be coming to school? What times would students be accessing that in-person learning, or visual or virtual learning, to really meet the needs of all of our students, which is what our goal is. And then also about transportation, meals. And so we really appreciate your input as we are meeting the needs of all of our students. I will now pass it on to Mr. Brewer.
Thanks, Molly. At the secondary level, our case managers are also contacting our families to determine which service delivery model would best meet their needs, especially as we look at switching from a traditional semester schedule into a virtual and hybrid quarter system. We can't overstate our commitment to prioritizing the education and support of each one of the students in Central Valley, especially those students who are unable to access learning remotely. And so the development of these service models really was a response to the unique needs of each student and each family. And so we are also asking, especially at the secondary level, if you did receive an online survey regarding your students' participation in general education classes, that you would complete that prior to August 21st, because that will help us to make sure that we are placing them in the correct elective options. If you have any questions or concerns as you move forward, please don't hesitate to reach out to your child's case manager or to Molly or to myself. At this time, I'll pass this on to Tim Newton-Boom to talk about parent support.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. One of the things that we find that is going to be very important is to be able to make sure that our parents know how to access what we call Blackboard Ultra. And the Blackboard system is a learning management system. We know this last spring, many of you experienced many different logins. We either got it from an email or we got it from a Google Classroom. And that now you have a single point of login to be able to access all of the different learning resources that will be available to you. So one of the things that will be launched on August 24th are online modules for families to be able to go through so they can get familiarized with the Blackboard system. We also recognize that while that is available, doesn't really work for everybody. So starting the week of August 31st, we'll be putting a schedule out to be able to provide some curbside service support. And the curbside service support might be locations that we either go to or that you come to, where you can drive through, be able to potentially get a device if you don't have one. And Mr. Martin will be talking about device distribution here in a little bit, and be able to help you get logged on, show you how to maneuver it so that you can have that safe in-person overview of the Blackboard platform. The other thing I want to call out on the Blackboard system is it is a It is a new feature for a number of our teachers, but it's something we have been using in a virtual learning environment for a number of years in Central Valley School District. Each of our teachers will receive 10 to 12 hours of training on the online curriculum and Blackboard use. So know that every one of our teachers will be well trained in that, and that will be the single place where all of your resources are accessed during that time. I know some of you had some questions too, like if I'm doing self-paced in Blackboard, will it just be reading and I got to follow along? In most cases, there are video modules that are available to you to be able to provide some overview and lesson. Some of those are our teachers. Some of those are provided already through some other online curriculum, but those types of supports are available through there. So if you're doing the self-paced, that you have some guidance as a parent to be able to provide some instructional lesson. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Rao, who's going to talk about the help desk.
Thank you, Mr. Newton-Boom, and good evening. One of the other things we heard was that there is a need for technology support through other areas as well. And so we have put together a virtual learning help desk. This help desk will be physically located at the district office and will be staffed from 7 a.m. in the morning until 9:30 p.m. at night. We'll have up to 15 folks in that virtual learning help desk area that will be able to provide support for you in a number of different areas that you might have questions about. For instance, you know, all of a sudden you can't find the password or the password is not working. How do I get it reset? That's a phone call you can make, and our virtual learning help desk will be able to work you through that. Or there's a PDF that I have to upload for my child's work, and I'm just not sure how to do that. The help desk will be where you turn. The help desk will have a single phone number that you can call into, and from there you'll be directed either towards elementary help desk or a secondary help desk. Those folks will be trained in a number of basic troubleshooting items, as well as all the different programs that will be used either at the elementary or secondary areas. And so we hope that this will be a great help to families as you move through this virtual learning world. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Dr. Vanderwegen to talk about outreach.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Rao. Another method of parent support that we think is really important is to have a district outreach team. And this team will be comprised of our district safety and security officers, our district social workers, school counselors, our learning specialists, and our English language development specialists. And this team will be responsible for reaching out to families that, for example, may not have had the opportunity to decide on a learning platform choice for them. They could also help families with getting devices and provide training for parents on how to use those devices. Another role of this outreach team will be to help parents if they need connection to child support and school supplies. They'll also be responsible for reaching out to families and helping with that as well. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Martin, who will talk about Chromebook distribution.
Thank you, Dr. Vanderwegen. As many of you know, last spring we distributed many thousands of Chromebooks to families for students to use. We asked that folks that did receive those to keep those over the summer so that they could use them in the fall. And so there are several thousand deployed already to families. Families feel like they need more Chromebooks. Maybe they had students share them in the past in the spring and would like one for each of their children. They can certainly request more. And in fact, beginning the week of the 24th, you won't have to request it. You can just show up to Central Valley High School, University High School. We'll have more specific information of the times that we'll be distributing, but it will just be kind of a first come, first serve, and we should have enough Chromebooks for folks to access those and to borrow those again this year for their students' learning. So once again, the week of the 24th at Central Valley High School and University High School, for all levels of students, parents can come and request devices for their students for this coming year.
One of the very important things that we do is also provide meal distribution. And we are going to continue that process, of course. The program will operate under the National School Breakfast and Lunch Program, which means that meals will be provided for Central Valley students. Students will be charged based on their free, reduced, or regular price paid status that they have. And one of the nice things is we also have a waiver at this point that allows us to serve more than one meal at a time, and that those meals can be taken off campus. So what that allows us to do is to have really two different distribution types here. One will be what we call the meal box. The meal box will have 5 breakfast and 5 lunch in it each week. There's 2 ways to go about getting a meal box. One, you'll have the opportunity to actually go online and pre-order that as to which school you want to pick it up and when, and you'll be able to have that then. And then there's also going to be a number of times throughout the week where there will be set times that they will be offering meal boxes. Again, that's the 5 breakfast, 5 lunch, and you'll be able to go to the school of your choice and be able to pick up that meal box at that time. The meal boxes will be put together in a way that they'll have some bulk items in them. There will be some frozen meal items so that you can reheat those later in the week as well. Beyond the meal box idea, there's also the daily meals. In the daily service, we're going to serve meals from either Central Valley High School or University High School every day during the week from noon to 1 o'clock. All you need to do is to go to the school and be able to pick up that meal. Again, you don't have to pre-order those. All you have to do is show up and be able to pick those up. And we would love the opportunity to provide those to you and your children. With that, I will hand it over to Mr. Newton-Boom and Dr. Vanderwegen to talk about childcare.
Good evening again. We certainly recognize the community need in this time for childcare. We want to share with you tonight some ways that we're trying to work through different avenues to be able to create greater options for our parents in this difficult time. First, we want to remind you that we will be providing last resort childcare for health providers and first responders. We did provide this last spring. We will continue to do so. Anything we provide in our schools, please understand they'll be in a specific zone in that school. We'll have small, limited numbers at each site. We will have mask and physical distancing. We will have health screening stations to ensure safety as students come in. We'll be cohorting students, meaning we'll have groups of students so that we don't cross-mingle students in that. And we have intensified cleaning procedures to ensure the safety of those students that are coming for that last resort childcare. Some other things that we have been working on, Dr. Vanderwegen, as part of our outreach, has been working closely in her partnership, Central Valley's partnership with the Boys and Girls Club. And our Boys and Girls Club will be offering in one of our vacant facilities that at the Keystone building, a day program that will be available for about 125 students. Now that's just one facet of that. We're really excited that this could be an option for some of our community. We just had a meeting last week with Hub that they are able to serve 30 to 50 students in a daytime virtual environment. So we would be able to provide them some, devices so that students could access learning there at the Hub. And then Mrs. Vanderwegen is also working with some of our community partners, some of our community churches, reaching out to our church network and saying, are you willing to do this? What do you need? And in that, do we need to provide Wi-Fi? We can get you hotspots in that facility. We can send you some staff to help facilitate the learning. Trying to create those networks so that we can give back to the community and meet those needs and some of those barriers there. Further, we're also reaching out to our community childcare providers. I'm working closely with Childcare Aware, which is the community advocate and coordinator for the regional childcare providers in the Spokane area. We are scheduled to have a meeting next Wednesday at 6:30, a Zoom meeting with the providers. And in that meeting, what we're hoping to do is really reach out and say, how can we support you to support our families in this time? We understand that our child care facilities are experiencing some challenges. So what can we do to support that? Whether that is Wi-Fi that we could bring to their facilities, Whether they are short-staffed, we can provide them some staff from Central Valley School District to go in and help them facilitate some of the online learning for some of our school-age children. So we're continuing to look at these various options, knowing that is a tremendous need within our community, and we will have more information to come as soon as we're able to share out some of those details. And I'll turn this over to Jay for the safety protocols.
Thank you, Mr. Newton. One of the things we want to make sure, besides also working on our virtual world, that we are making sure that our buildings are going to be ready to reopen safely just as soon as possible. And so we are working very diligently following the Department of Health and the Spokane Regional Health Guidelines into what we have to do in our physical spaces in order to be able to return when that is allowed. And so some of the things that we have done, we have a very robust cleaning protocol that is will be used on not only a daily basis for our regular cleaning and enhanced cleaning, but also in protocols for in case of a COVID outbreak or a COVID case within our school or a classroom. What will the steps be that we take, and how do we go about making sure that that space is safe to come back to and clean? Everything from our own folks working on this up to and including using professionals to help us make sure that we have disinfected and really prepared that classroom space for your students. Our cleaning protocol as well as our screening protocol are both online at our district website, and I would encourage you to look at those and review those for your own information. The screening protocol will be something that we follow each and every day, just like as many places that are open right now. You'll have to have our students attest to the symptoms that they may or may not have that day, as well as a temperature check each day that they come in. Of course, wearing masks is something that is not optional, that we will be doing. Both staff and students will be wearing masks. And we've been working on making sure that our classrooms can be a place where they can also social distance so that they do have the 6 feet apart from their desk. And so we have crews working on this right now to make sure that we can place up to 15 students in a primary classroom and up to 18 in an intermediate or secondary. And so we are working with that, as well as making sure that we are able to cohort our classes, which means, again, as Mr. Newton Boom explained earlier, keeping a group of students together without overmingling with other groups throughout the building throughout the day. And so working on different entrances, making sure that they have access to their classroom, but making sure that they can also stay within their group. One of the other important things that we're working on that is a very important guideline here is the ventilation in our schools. And what we have done is to increase our outside air exchange by 100%. So that we have that air exchange happening more often throughout the day, and that it is actually increased from what we have had in the past. And so we are working hard to make sure that your schools and your buildings will be ready for you as soon as we can come back safely in person. With that, I will turn this over to Ms. Numberg to start our questions and answer period.
We want to thank you for attending with us tonight, and we want to do a special thank you to the Spokane Valley Chamber for sponsoring our webinar here tonight. If you've not done so already, please submit your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will see all the questions, but we likely won't have time to answer every one of them. However, we're compiling all the questions, and we will follow up by putting frequently asked questions and answers on our district website. I want to start off with we have some questions this week, and we added, we were listening to our parents, and we added an option 4, which Tim has explained to you. We sent an email to our families last evening that you should have received. If you did not receive that email, you can send a message to communications@cvsd.org, and we will look into that for you and get that email off to you to sign up. We do have some questions about changing between the options, and if after August 21st you want to change your selection, how do you go about that? And also, do any of these options unenroll you from your home school or from CVSD? If Tim Newton Boom could answer that, please.
I sure can. So after August 21st, and you may, I know this is a lot of pressure. Families are trying to make the best decision for their family. After August 21st, you have circumstances that change, or something is coming about, please let us know as soon as possible. The sooner is better, so that we can plan our staffing and work through those options. So you can just simply email and reach out to us or your building principal, and they'll work with us to make some of those appropriate changes. One of the things is, how flexible are the options? And I want to talk a little bit about that. Is, you know, what happens if I choose option 2 and 3, but then later in the year, I've decided to go full-time online. I want to come back to my home school. What we can say is that you're guaranteed a spot back in the fall of 2021 if you choose to go 100% full-time online. However, you could go back to your school at the time that there is a spot available. And the reason we say that is we're working to staff these flexible options. It's going to get tight in some of the schools. Now, if you think you're planning to return to school and that this is something you have in mind, I suggest to you that you choose option 1 or 4, whether you're a self-paced or school-paced, whatever works best for you. So that way you have greater flexibility to immediately return to your home school, stay with the same teacher, and then at that time, if you're not safe, we still have that same circumstance. You could enroll in the full-time option, and that also is space available, but I do believe there's going to be some greater flexibility in enrolling to a virtual environment than trying to enroll back into your home school in the middle of the year. That would be my guidance if I had a crystal ball.
Okay, Superintendent Small, we have a couple of questions for you. We have some questions out there because some of the other school districts have delayed their start time. We want to know if we have any plans for delaying the start time, and then also what metrics will we use, or what determination will we use for going back to the in-person learning?
Absolutely, great questions. We at this point in time have no plans to delay the start to the school year. So we're still continuing to plan to start on September 9th, welcoming our students back in a virtual environment. We're excited to do that. The exception to that, to changing the start of the school year, would be if we start to get information from our county health department that if we delayed by a week, that we could start in person, we might consider to do so. But that would be our only change for the start of the school year. We're ready to start September 9th, ready to go. The next question is we have posted the Department of Health metrics decision tree on our website. And you can go look at the different categories that are there for COVID spread. And currently we are in Spokane Valley, or Spokane County, we are in a high category, and we want to get to the moderate category so that we can start bringing our students back into in-person learning. We will continually be working with our Department of Health to look at and understand the characteristics of what is happening in our community regarding COVID-19. And as soon as we are able to do, as soon as we get guidance that we can bring our students back, we certainly will. If you look at the guidance that is part of that decision tree, you've got over 75 cases per 100,000 over a 2-week period of time. And as soon as you get at that, below that 75, then we can start looking at how it is that we move our students back into in-person learning. And then what I will say is this pandemic and COVID-19 has changed a lot. And sometimes it changes within a day. And we will be able to change and adjust our metrics based on the guidance from the Department of Health and our local Department of Health in order to get our children back into school. We will not have long delays in order to shift from virtual to in-person. And if you look at our plan, it really is built to be flexible. It's built to have a virtual backbone of curriculum and instruction so that we can shift. If we have an outbreak after we go in person, we can shift to virtual and back to in-person again very quickly.
Thank you, Superintendent. We have quite a few questions about kindergartners and our younger learners, especially, and looking at screen time and what the expectations are with screen time, and are any activities built in there. So Eric Hoagland, if you could touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Kindergartners, they're special and they're unique. They are a great group of kids as we welcome them each fall. One of the things that I think that we can recognize that we're sad about is that this is a major life event for our young learners, and for them to come back face to face in this situation is probably not what we would hope for. That being said, we have experts in our schools that are ready to handle this. They know how to read young learners, know how to react to them, and they know how to actually build in natural breaks. So although the sample schedule that we put forward looks pretty daunting from a screen time, I have complete faith in our kindergarten teachers that as they are working with our kids, they know how to stop, take breaks, read that, react to it, and have these different moments in which they're able to pull that out. In the sample schedule, I kind of shared a little bit about how we have these little small breakouts in small group or independence, and then small group learning with the teacher and independent groups. Those are times in which kids will be able to do that. But even with that, our teachers will be able to look at what's happening with our kids, read that, and then be able to stop and say, hey, let's take a break. We call them brain breaks. I know when I was a primary teacher, I just said, let's get our wiggles out. And we would stand up, we would wiggle, we'd move around a little bit, get ourselves going again, and then we focus our children, we start back again. And then kindergartners are unique. You do it again and again. But I think we recognize the uniqueness of our kindergarten learners, our young learners, and the screen time, and we're really cognizant of that, and we're ready to approach that with our professionals in our schools.
We're going to move to the opposite end of the spectrum with high school and talk about, we've had a lot of different questions from band and PE to 0 hour and advanced placement, and why are we doing 3 classes? So any of those that you can touch upon, Mr. Martin?
Well, certainly the 3 classes in a quarter, we arrived at that based on the success of our students in the spring. We had a lot of students and families who were concerned, as well as our educators who noticed that many students were disengaging, and when they asked why, it was because it was just too much. Couldn't keep up with 6 courses, organizing that. And so based on that feedback from our students and families, we decided that focusing on less courses and having more content each day and each week in those courses would be better for our kids in this virtual environment. So that's the reason why we decided to go to the quarter system this year. We know that that does also require that we're going to have to work in some other enrichment times during those off quarters, perhaps between, say, math classes, because there will be a break between first semester, which might be quarter number 2, for example, and second semester math of the same math course being in quarter 4. So we need to work and make sure that our kids can stay connected with some of that material during their off time so they can be successful in both quarters.
Okay, we have some questions around parent time. How much parent time is there for the school pace versus the self-pace and the parent involvement in that? And then also, what platform are we using for the learning? Tim, if you want to take that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So one of the things that we know to be true is that when a student experiences a regular classroom, there's many dynamics and considerations that go into that. We're also building a citizen and the social connections and everything else. When you take that curriculum and you really are looking in a one-on-one situation, the time needed is much more condensed. Now that varies from student to student and based upon their ability and motivation to move through that. If it were my son, it might take a lot longer. But if my other son, he'd probably get through it so he could just be done and just get it off his plate. So what I would say is if you look at ELA, in the elementary school, English language arts, and you look at mathematics, those core areas, what might look daunting in a school-paced schedule, when you look at a self-paced schedule based upon the ability, I would estimate you're looking at a couple of hours, 2 to 3 hours a day on average. Some days it's going to be less, some days it's going to be more. You could probably pace it where you might do more of it on one day and skip a day, or do it on the weekends and the evenings. So that's one aspect that I think that you could use to kind of calibrate your time. We have the flexibility to be able to do it. The platform for our elementary school is going to be Zern Math for math, Lexia Learning for ELA, and then we would also, in our secondary schools, we have some traditional virtual learning modules in most cases where it's already built. So those are designed curriculum that have pre-recorded lessons in there for people so they can have the guidance, they can have the lesson. And so there's a shell within the Blackboard system that's drawing from adopted curriculum that we have been working with in partnership these last few years. So those would be the things we would draw from to guide you as a parent and have the resources and the visual lessons to be able to follow and track with.
Mr. Newboom, I think you missed out on MobiMax.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Mr. Small. And MobiMax is also a part of that. That really kind of wraps around all of the areas, social studies, science, and really provides some great independent practice work that we've adopted as a district as well. Thank you. Sorry, I missed that.
We had a question around school counselors, and with the elementary and middle school in particular, will the school counselors be available in this virtual environment? And that may be part of the outreach that we're talking about. So I'll leave that up to you of who wants to grab that one.
I'll go ahead and grab that one. Our school counselors are going to be back and serving our students as normal and not as normal. They will be continuing with many of their natural functions in their schools, but then they will also be serving our students in a variety of ways that might not be typical. And some of those would include even in some of our attendance taking when students are not able to make it, then some of our counselors will be looking and reaching out just to make sure that everything's okay, and if there's any support that can be needed. But many of their typical functions will still be in place and available for our families to reach out to our schools and ask for that support at any time.
Okay, we have some questions around IEPs. Who will they contact about IEPs, or will the special education department be reaching out to them? Eric Brewer and Molly Carolyn?
I can take that, Molly. At the secondary level, they can go ahead and give me a call. They should have been contacted or will be contacted by their case manager within the next week or so. We have asked all of our case managers at the elementary and secondary level to be contacting each of the families of the students with which they work so that we can walk them through this process and the discussion of which service delivery model would be best. If they do have supplementary questions or if they have not had any contact from their case manager, please feel free to reach out to Molly or myself, and we would be happy to address those concerns. Molly.
Especially if your student is transitioning from elementary to middle school or middle school to high school, please reach out to Mr. Brewer or I for that information, and we will help you get set up with your case manager for next year.
That's great. Thank you very much. We have some questions around some of the expectations with grading and testing and what that might look like. And also attendance is part of that as well. What are the expectations of our students? Mr. Newton-Boom?
Yeah, certainly. So when we look at attendance, we will, we recognize that last spring was kind of a unique situation that came upon us. We had some different guidance and expectations from our Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, OSPI. And now we're really looking at how do we really replicate how we serve school like we would each and every day in a self-paced model or the school-paced model and the self-paced model. So we will be taking, in a school-paced model, we'll be taking daily attendance. The self-paced will be based upon the learning plan that we work with families on and how much they're engaging. The grading aspect of that really will be back to our standard grading policies. And one of the things that we know to be true is last spring we heard loud and clear from our community, and I as a parent, that when we really couldn't adversely impact the grade or there wasn't really traditional grading in place, students lost some motivation. I had a senior last year that certainly experienced that, and that was a bit of a struggle in our own home. So we'll have our standard grading policy, but please understand our guidance to our staff will be in these times, we will have our standard grading policy, but we need to have some grace and flexibility. We certainly recognize that there are going to be some hiccups in your access, some challenges in being able to get things submitted, and we will work with families through that. Furthermore, we will also know that's an important time to keep kids engaged and accountable, and that parents need more timely grading access to student grades. So we'll be working with our staff that we will have updated grades weekly so that you have the ability to be able to monitor your students' progress. And if there's a problem, to reach out to the teacher, the principal, the school counselor. And with regard to assessment, I'm assuming we're talking about classroom-based assessments. We'll have to find some flexible virtual ways. One of the things that's really embedded in many of our online curricular pieces that we've adopted is there are assessments there. There's pre-assessments, there's some progress assessments along the way that can be very formative. So while we used to maybe do more pencil paper tests, there's some online options for us to be able to assess students' performance as well.
And following up on that, we have some questions about high school graduation requirements. Has anything changed with the high school graduation requirements at this time? Mr. Martin?
No, the high school graduation requirements are the same. For those families that had seniors last year, you'll know that there were some emergency waivers set forward by OSBI and by the governor to remove some requirements and allow students to graduate with less than 24 credits. We have no such information at this time as to whether that will continue into the next school year. Our best thought on this is that it will really depend upon how the COVID transmission happens in our state over the course of this year. And if there is another emergency waiver of some sort that's put forward by OSBI or the governor, that will likely happen after the start of the calendar year.
Thank you. We have some questions just in general around workbooks or worksheets or supplies, packets, that type of thing. And I know we have a plan around that. Terry Vanderwiggen is one of our resources that has been working on that. And if anybody else wants to jump in there with her as well.
Yes, I can speak for the elementary students. We will have consumable materials for the elementary students in reading, writing, and math. And these consumables will be used two ways, both during the teacher-directed time and during the independent time. And it will be a way for students to demonstrate their learning and practice the skills that have been taught during the teacher-directed time.
We did have a question on our personal protective equipment with the clear masks. Mr. Rawl, are clear masks something that students can use when we do return to in-person?
There are two different kinds of clear masks. I'm not sure what you're asking about. The face shields can be used in certain circumstances with students who have permission or needs to use those. There's also a clear mask, face mask, and I am still looking at an answer for that to see whether or not it meets the guidelines. But there are options for the clear shields for those students who will need that. And we'll take care of that on a case-by-case basis, of course.
We did have a question about high school orientation, and I know 6th grade is kind of in the same boat too. So our freshmen plans for transition, and then also our 6th graders, Mr. Martin and Mr. Lambert.
I'll go ahead and answer about 6th grade first. With our 6th graders, this transition period in their life is very important, and typically we welcome them to middle school with sneak peek, and we invite parents and students on campus, and they get to meet their teachers and walk their schedules. Obviously, it's going to be a little different this year, but we are working with all of our school principals to plan a sneak peek event, likely virtual, but that way they will still get to meet their principal and some of the staff and their counselor there at the school, and talk through what that day will look like before needing to show up on that first day of school in a virtual environment. So there will be some transition in that way. And Kent, if you wanted to talk about the freshmen.
Yeah, typically each year we have an orientation for our freshmen as well. Our high schools are looking to determine how to do that in this virtual model. And so more information should follow in the next week or so.
Okay, we had a question somewhere in there about community involvement. How can our community be involved and be a part of this with our schools? Mr. Superintendent Small.
I think the first thing that our community can do is start by being great neighbors. Reach out to families that are in your neighborhood. Offer assistance if you have assistance. I know there's been a lot of discussion around pods and families getting together to support one another in a virtual environment. I would ask that our families reach out beyond their normal circles. Reach out to look for other people that might be in need and be able to help them. I think that as we move forward, wearing a mask. We want to get our children back into school, and following the health guidance and the guidance that is put forth, I think is having an impact, a positive impact on the number of cases. We see our cases start to go down this week, and we need to continue that. I think that's a huge part of this. I think if you're involved in a school or a business and you have assets and or resources that you would like to put in the hands of kids, please let us know, and we'll be able to move you and point you in the right direction in order to make that happen. I think continually to engage with your teachers and your children with their teachers, keeping your family engaged in our process, I think is another important thing we can do as a community.
Okay, just a reminder that we will be posting a video of our webinars on our website next week. We will also have on there frequently asked questions and the answers to those questions as well. So you can look at that at cvsd.org or at any of your school websites. Superintendent Small, do you have any final words for our folks?
Just want to say thank you very much for your participation in this webinar and or the webinars earlier this week. We look forward to serving our children first in a virtual environment and then back in person as soon as we can. And we're excited. We have built a virtual environment that is much different than the environment that we experienced last spring. Our teachers will be prepared. We'll be prepared to meet you where you're at and engage your student in a different way and a very engaging way. I want to thank you very much and have a good evening.